Gentlemen, let's have a real conversation, man to man. You're older, you've been around, you've got stories, experience, maybe a little gray in the beard. And whether you're 35, 45, or 55, you've noticed something. Younger women may look at you differently. Sometimes intrigued, sometimes curious, but sometimes completely turned off. And it's not because you're older. It's not the age. It's the habits. It's the things some older men do that scream insecurity, neediness, or outdated thinking. These aren't just unattractive, they're deal breakers. Let's make one thing clear. Maturity can be magnetic. Confidence, self-discipline, wisdom, those are traits many younger women deeply respect. But when an older guy tries too hard to prove himself, or worse, acts like he's stuck in a time warp, that attraction evaporates. So what are the habits that kill your game before it even starts? What are the silent killers that make younger women cringe? Let's dive into 7 unattractive habits older men must kill immediately if they want to stop repelling and start attracting the right kind of attention. Trying too hard to be young again is one of the most unattractive and obvious behaviors older men fall into when interacting with younger women. It's not just noticeable, it's awkward, inauthentic, and often counterproductive. While aging is inevitable, desperation to resist it at all costs sends a strong signal that a man is uncomfortable with who he has become. It tells a woman that instead of embracing maturity, he's chasing a version of himself that no longer exists. This habit manifests in many subtle and not so subtle ways. It could be the way he dresses, clothing that's trendy but clearly not tailored to his age, physique, or presence. You've seen it before, a man in his 40s or 50s trying to pull off the same tight jeans, graphic tees, or flashy accessories worn by teenagers or college students. Rather than coming across as stylish, he appears out of place, like he's wearing a costume for a role he was never meant to play. Women, especially younger ones, are incredibly perceptive when it comes to authenticity. When they see a man dressing or acting out of alignment with his true self, it sets off alarm bells. It doesn't say, I'm confident. It says, I'm insecure about my age. It's not just fashion either. The language an older man uses can betray the same insecurity. Trying to adopt current slang, abbreviations, or cultural references he clearly doesn't understand makes it seem like he's trying to prove he can still hang. But again, this only highlights the age gap more than it bridges it. When a man says something like, that's lit, or no cap, with the wrong tone or context, it doesn't connect. It cringes. Younger women aren't looking for someone who mimics their friends. They're drawn to someone who has his own identity, his own lane, and his own flavor of confidence. Then there's the behavior. Older men who try to keep up with every trend, music, apps, nightclubs, even dance challenges on social media, often come across as chasing relevance instead of living in authenticity. There's nothing wrong with enjoying modern culture, but when that enjoyment becomes a performance, it loses its charm. A man who suddenly starts using TikTok lingo, showing off his Vibe playlist, or talking about Coachella like he's reliving his 20s doesn't come across as cool. He comes across as trying too hard. Younger women respect experience. They respect calmness, groundedness, and a sense of self that doesn't flinch under pressure. When an older man denies his own stage of life in an effort to appeal to her youth, he's essentially saying that his age, wisdom, and life experience aren't enough. He's suggesting that who he really is right now isn't valuable unless it mimics someone younger. That energy is deeply unattractive because confidence isn't about looking or acting young. It's about being rooted in who you are and owning it without apology. Ironically, the older man who embraces his age with pride is often more attractive to younger women than the one who tries to compete with guys half his age. Why? Because he's not chasing their approval. He's not performing. He's not pretending. He's fully in control of his presence. He shows up well-groomed, well-dressed for his style, not the trend, and speaks like a man who's lived, learned, and let go of needing to impress. He's not afraid of a wrinkle, a gray hair, or a slower pace. He carries himself with grace. That's the real flex. What's often misunderstood is that women, especially younger ones, aren't repelled by age, they're repelled by desperation. They're repelled by the man who clings to the idea that youth is the only currency that matters. What they're actually drawn to is a man who's emotionally intelligent, secure in his masculinity, and able to create safety without control. That kind of man doesn't need to prove that he's still got it. He just has it, because it's not about what he's wearing or what he's saying. It's about the energy he brings into the room. You don't have to relive your 20s to be respected by someone in their 20s. You don't have to change your music taste, your wardrobe, or your sense of humor to become more attractive. You simply have to stop apologizing for where you are in life. When you own your age, instead of trying to mask it, something shifts. You go from being a man trying to fit in to a man others want to follow. You go from awkward to admirable. And most importantly, you stop chasing attraction and start commanding it. Trying too hard to be young again is ultimately a fear-based behavior. It's rooted in the belief that age makes you less desirable, less relevant, or less worthy of love, but that belief is false. In fact, your age can be your greatest asset if you let it. When you walk, talk, dress, and behave in a way that reflects acceptance rather than resistance, you project power. And power, true, relaxed, grounded power, is timeless. Talking down or mansplaining is one of the most off-putting behaviors an older man can display when interacting with a younger woman. It might not always be intentional, but the effect is the same. It makes her feel belittled, underestimated, and dismissed. At its core, this habit stems from a flawed assumption that simply because a man has more life experience or years behind him, he automatically knows more, understands better, or is somehow wiser by default. But in reality, wisdom doesn't come just from age. It comes from self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and the ability to listen as much as you speak. When an older man begins to explain something to a woman that she already knows, or worse, assumes she doesn't understand purely based on her age, it communicates something subtle but powerful. I think you need me to interpret the world for you. It's not only insulting, it's condescending, even when it's disguised as helpfulness or concern. It still creates a dynamic where the man positions himself above her rather than beside her. That imbalance kills attraction. It makes her feel like a student, a child, or someone in need of guidance, rather than an equal partner in the conversation. The mistake many men make is thinking that their experience gives them authority in every conversation. So they interrupt, over-explain, or dominate the dialogue, thinking they're adding value. But what they're really doing is broadcasting insecurity. A secure man doesn't need to prove how much he knows. He doesn't rush to be the smartest person in the room. He doesn't assume that because he's older, he's automatically right. Instead, he listens, he engages, he respects the intelligence and perspective of the woman in front of him, no matter her age. This behavior is especially damaging when it shows up in subtle ways, correcting her unnecessarily, rephrasing what she just said as if to clarify it, or offering unsolicited advice every time she brings up a problem. These actions may seem small, but over time they build resentment. They make her feel like her voice is constantly being filtered through someone else's opinion. Instead of feeling heard and respected, she feels dismissed or micromanaged. And no woman, especially a younger one looking to connect with someone emotionally mature, wants to feel like she's in a conversation where she has to fight to be taken seriously. A man who constantly mansplains also reveals that he may not actually see her as an equal. He may see her as someone to impress, educate, or guide, rather than someone to understand. That dynamic turns what could be an emotionally engaging connection into a one-sided lecture. It drains the spark from the interaction, because attraction doesn't grow in a space where one person is towering over the other. It grows in a space where both people feel respected, seen, and valued for who they are, not just for what they know. It's worth noting that most younger women today are highly educated, self-awareness, and extremely capable. They've grown up in a world full of information. They've navigated social and cultural shifts that many older men haven't fully experienced. In many ways, their understanding of emotional nuance, communication, and even technology may be sharper than the older man assumes. So when he begins explaining basic things, whether it's how finances work, how the world really is, or her how she should manage her emotions. He's not being helpful, he's being dismissive, and worse, he's showing that he's out of touch with the world she lives in. What many men don't realize is that power doesn't come from dominating a conversation. It comes from knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It comes from being able to ask a thoughtful question, then sitting back and truly listening to the answer. When a woman sees that a man is genuinely curious about her perspective, not just waiting for his turn to talk, she feels safe, she feels connected, and that's where real attraction begins. Even if a man does have more experience in a certain area, the way he shares it makes all the difference. There's a world of difference between sharing insight and delivering a lecture. If it's framed with humility, openness, and a spirit of collaboration, it can be powerful. But if it's framed with superiority, it's immediately repelling. Tone, body language, and timing matter just as much as the content itself. Ultimately, talking down or mansplaining isn't just about words. It's about mindset. It reflects whether a man sees the woman he's speaking to as an equal or as someone who needs to be brought up to speed. And when a younger woman senses that the man she's with doesn't respect her intelligence, she pulls away, emotionally and often physically. No matter how accomplished, wealthy, or charismatic the man may be, if he doesn't respect her mind, she won't stay interested. In a world where women are demanding more emotional depth, mutual respect, and meaningful conversation, the days of the lecturing, know-it-all older man are over. The men who win today are the ones who know how to hold space, who listen more than they speak, who speak with, not at, who understand that respect isn't about being right, it's about being real. Flexing wealth or status is one of the most transparent and unattractive habits an older man can display when trying to connect with a younger woman. It's an age-old tactic, the idea that displaying material success can somehow serve as a substitute for emotional depth, character, or genuine connection. Unfortunately, this approach not only fails to impress, but also backfires, often leaving women feeling alienated, manipulated, and most importantly, uninterested. When an older man focuses on flaunting his wealth or status, he inadvertently sets up a transactional relationship rather than an emotional one. The assumption here is that by showcasing what he's accumulated, whether it's money, a fancy car, a big house, or a successful career, he will somehow gain admiration, attraction, or affection. But this strategy operates on a fundamental misunderstanding of what truly draws people together. True attraction isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. While material success can be a sign of hard work and ambition, using it to validate your worth makes it seem like you don't trust yourself enough to be valued for anything deeper. The mistake many men make is thinking that the more they talk about their accomplishments or possessions, the more attractive they will appear. They believe that flashing the keys to a luxury car, bragging about their vacation homes, or mentioning how many zeros are in their paycheck will somehow give them an edge. But what they fail to recognize is that this type of behavior feels manipulative. It's an attempt to leverage external factors as a shortcut to emotional connection. Women can sense when a man is using his wealth to win approval, and the result is often the opposite of what was intended. What's even more frustrating for a younger woman is when this behavior comes across as a subtle form of dominance. When an older man boasts about his wealth or status, he's often trying to position himself above her. It becomes a way of measuring value, not by who she is, but by her proximity to his success. It creates an imbalance in the relationship where she feels like she has to earn his approval, and it erodes the possibility of seeing him as a potential partner rather than a figure of authority or even an object of transaction. The message is clear. I have this and now I'm showing it to you, hoping you'll find me worthy. Moreover, flexing wealth can lead to a false sense of superiority. A man who leans too heavily on his material success might assume that because he's achieved a certain level of financial success or social status, he's automatically in a position of power. One might expect his accomplishments to impress or compel admiration, but in reality, they often do the opposite. Women are generally more interested in emotional security, trust, and authenticity than in how many zeros are on a paycheck. The more a man tries to flaunt his wealth, the more he signals that he believes this is all that matters. And unfortunately for a younger woman looking for depth, that just doesn't cut it. It's important to recognize that younger women are not naive. They've grown up in a world where materialism is constantly being pushed in their faces. They've seen the rise of influencers, celebrities, and businessmen who flaunt their wealth as a way to build a following or gain admiration. They're not easily swayed by flashy cars, expensive clothes, or lavish displays of wealth. What they are drawn to is substance. They want to see how a man makes them feel, not how much money he can throw around to prove his worth. Flexing wealth or status can also create a power imbalance in a relationship where the woman feels like she's constantly trying to keep up or earn her place in the man's life. This dynamic is not healthy, as it shifts the focus from mutual respect to a one-sided validation system. If the woman feels like her value in the relationship is determined by her ability to meet certain external standards, whether it's maintaining a certain lifestyle, enjoying expensive dinners, or traveling in luxury, then the connection between them becomes transactional. Future intimacy doesn't come from external symbols of success. It comes from emotional vulnerability, shared experiences, and mutual respect. What men often overlook is that real attraction is built on compatibility, shared values, and mutual respect, not on possessions. A man's worth doesn't lie in his financial standing, and constantly emphasizing wealth to a younger woman sends the message that you don't believe in your ability to connect on a deeper level. If your value is measured only by what you can offer materially, it's hard to establish a lasting emotional connection because the relationship will always feel shallow and unbalanced. Furthermore, it's not just about the material possessions themselves, but also the attitude behind them. A man who's constantly boasting about his wealth is often doing so because he's insecure. He feels the need to prove something to others, to validate his own self-worth, and to gain approval. In the long run, this insecurity becomes more apparent than the items he's showing off. Women, especially younger ones, are drawn to men who are self-assured, secure in who they are, and who don't need to rely on external validation to feel good about themselves. They respect men who understand that true value comes from within, not from the things you own, but from the way you treat others, how you communicate, and the emotional intelligence you bring to the table. The unfortunate truth is that flexing wealth or status doesn't make an older man more attractive to younger women. It makes him seem shallow, insecure, and out of touch with what truly matters. Instead of leveraging material success to win affection, men would do well to focus on building emotional connection, offering empathy, and showing authenticity. These qualities are far more attractive and enduring than any luxury possession or high sets title ever will be. Bitterness toward modern dating or women is one of the most damaging attitudes an older man can display when engaging with younger women. It doesn't matter how subtle or justified he believes his complaints are. Negativity about women, dating, or how things used to be poisons the energy of any interaction. It immediately signals a lack of growth, unresolved wounds, and most importantly, a perspective that is stuck in the past. Younger women who are navigating the complexities of modern relationships themselves aren't drawn to someone who resents the very landscape they live in. They're drawn to someone who understands the world as it is and navigates it with maturity and grace. Bitterness often leaks out in conversations that are supposed to be casual or even flirtatious. A man might make snide comments about how girls today only care about money or how modern women don't appreciate good men anymore. He might casually reference how dating apps are ruining relationships or complain that chivalry is dead because women have changed. While he may think he is sharing a wise observation, what she hears is a man who hasn't processed his disappointment in a healthy way. Instead of presenting himself as grounded and open, he comes across as jaded and emotionally unavailable. Younger women are often far more emotionally intelligent than they're given credit for. They can sense underlying bitterness even when it's dressed up as humor or sarcasm. A joke about modern women being too entitled or a complaint about how hard it is to be a man nowadays might seem harmless, but they chip away at attraction. Because underneath those comments is a deep-seated frustration that usually stems from past failures, rejections, or unmet expectations. And instead of doing the work to heal, the bitter man projects his pain onto the entire gender or generation. That's not strength, that's deflection. This bitterness becomes especially unattractive when it replaces curiosity with judgment. Instead of trying to understand younger women, their perspectives, their challenges, their values, he dismisses them. He assumes they're shallow, selfish, or misguided simply because they don't date the way women did decades ago. This rigid thinking makes him emotionally rigid. It signals that he's more interested in preserving his worldview than adapting or growing. A man who refuses to understand the present is a man who can't create a future with someone. And younger women feel that. A man who's bitter about modern dating often brings a negative energy into every interaction. He expects rejection. He anticipates disappointment. He's already decided that women can't be trusted or that relationships are doomed. And so he carries a defensive tone in every conversation. He may disguise it as just being honest or telling it like it is, but the truth is he's building emotional walls so high that no one can connect with him. And if a woman feels like she has to break through a fortress of resentment just to reach his heart, she's going to walk away before she ever gets close. One of the most frustrating things for a younger woman is trying to connect with a man who views her through the lens of every woman who has hurt him. If she senses that she's being judged for the actions of someone from his past, she'll immediately feel the imbalance. She didn't cause his pain, yet she's being asked to prove she's different, to earn his trust, to reassure him that she won't disappoint him like the others. That's not her burden to carry, and expecting her to carry it is unfair, unattractive, and emotionally immature. Bitterness also kills playfulness. One of the key elements in building attraction is the ability to enjoy each other, to laugh, to be present, and to keep things light in the early stages. A bitter man struggles with this because he's constantly analyzing, judging, or waiting for the moment things will go wrong. He's not enjoying the connection. He's testing it. He's waiting for her to say something that confirms his negative beliefs, and that creates pressure, tension, and emotional heaviness that repels rather than attracts. Many men fall into the trap of thinking their bitterness is justified because they've been through it. They believe their experiences have earned them the right to be cynical or critical, but the truth is everyone has scars. What sets high-value men apart is not whether they've been hurt, it's how they respond to that hurt. Do they allow it to harden them, or do they allow it to refine them? Bitterness is a choice. It's a refusal to grow. And no one wants to date someone who has given up on hope, trust, or the possibility of joy. Younger women aren't looking for a perfect man. They're looking for an emotionally safe one. A man who is honest about his past but not imprisoned by it. A man who can talk about challenges without turning them into rants. A man who acknowledges that dating has changed but who remains curious, adaptable, and positive. That mindset is magnetic. It shows resilience. It shows maturity. And it shows that he hasn't allowed the world to make him cold. When a man drops the bitterness and starts showing up with openness and optimism, he becomes a rare presence in a world filled with cynicism. That's the kind of energy that draws people in, not because it's flashy or dominant, but because it feels good to be around. And when a younger woman feels emotionally uplifted rather than drained by your presence, she doesn't care how old you are. She cares about how you make her feel. Acting like a savior is one of the most off-putting and patronizing behaviors older men can exhibit when interacting with younger women. On the surface, it might seem well-meaning, offering help, guidance, or protection, but underneath it lies a subtle message that says, "You need me to fix you." Whether it's financial assistance, career advice, emotional support, or life direction, the savior complex assumes that the woman is broken or lost and that the man is the solution. This approach doesn't build connection, it builds a hierarchy. And in today's world where younger women are increasingly independent, self-aware, and emotionally intelligent, this kind of dynamic doesn't just feel outdated, it feels insulting. At the heart of this behavior is a misplaced sense of superiority. The older man often believes his age, experience, or success entitles him to guide, mold, or even rescue the younger woman from the perceived chaos of her own life. He might offer unsolicited advice at every turn, try to fix her problems without being asked, or make comments that suggest she'd be better off if she just listened to him. He may frame it as caring or looking out for her best interests, but the undertone is always the same: I know better than you. And the moment a woman feels like she's being parented or micromanaged, the attraction dies. The savior complex is deeply tied to control. It's not always conscious, but often the man who acts like a savior is looking for validation. He wants to feel needed. He wants to be seen as indispensable. So he creates situations where he can step in, show off his resources, or offer solutions. But what he's really doing is centering the relationship around himself and his role as the fixer. This kind of dynamic quickly becomes suffocating because it doesn't allow the woman to fully express her own strength, independence, or identity. It puts her in a subordinate position, one where she's constantly being reminded of her flaws and his role as the answer to them. This behavior also assumes that a younger woman hasn't already been taking care of herself. It erases her experiences, her resilience, and her growth. She may have navigated hardships, built a career, managed complex emotional challenges, or cultivated her own support systems. But the savior doesn't see that. He sees someone to protect, someone to guide, someone to shape. And no matter how sweet or well-intentioned it may appear, this outlook is deeply condescending. Because it doesn't celebrate her strength, it overlooks it. What's worse is that when she resists the savior's help or sets boundaries, he may become resentful. He might say she's ungrateful, too independent, or unwilling to accept love. But what he's really upset about is losing the role he built for himself. If he can't be the hero in her story, he doesn't know how to connect. And that reveals a painful truth. His affection was never about partnership. It was about control. It was about being needed more than being loved. This dynamic becomes especially problematic when money, career advice, or life direction are involved. An older man might offer to pay for things, invest in her business, or help her get on track, but these gestures often come with strings attached, expectations of loyalty, gratitude, or influence over her decisions. When the help feels like a transaction, the emotional trust breaks down. She may start to feel obligated, indebted, or guilty for asserting her own choice. Instead of feeling empowered by the relationship, she feels managed. And no one wants to be in a relationship where freedom is the cost of affection. The truth is, women don't want saviors. They want equals. They don't need someone to fix their lives. They want someone to walk alongside them. A truly confident and emotionally mature man doesn't need to play the hero. He knows how to support without smothering, how to listen without lecturing, and how to help without taking over. He understands that the greatest strength lies not in control, but in collaboration. When she says she's struggling, he doesn't jump in with a 5-step solution. He asks how she feels, what she needs, and how he can be there for her. Not as a rescuer, but as a partner. What many older men fail to realize is that trying to be the savior actually reveals insecurity, not strength. It shows a lack of trust in her ability to lead her own life and a need to validate one's self-worth through another person's dependence. True confidence doesn't demand to be needed. It allows space for others to shine. It doesn't need to be the center of attention. It finds fulfillment in mutual respect and shared growth. When a man stops trying to be the savior and instead becomes a safe, supportive presence, everything changes. The dynamic shifts from parent-child to adult-adult. There's no pressure, no control, no silent expectation of gratitude or compliance. There's just presence. And that presence, humble, open, and emotionally grounded, is what builds real connection. It's not about solving her problems. It's about standing with her while she solves them herself. That's where real intimacy lives, not in rescue, but in respect. And that's the energy younger women are drawn to, not because they need it, but because they choose it. Neglecting physical fitness or hygiene is one of the most instantly noticeable and deeply unattractive habits older men can develop, especially when trying to connect with younger women. While it may sound superficial on the surface, it's about far more than looks. It's a reflection of self-respect, discipline, and the message you send about how you value yourself and others. Physical appearance isn't the most important factor in attraction, but the effort you put into maintaining it speaks volumes. And when a man visibly gives up on taking care of his body, grooming or basic cleanliness, it creates an impression that he's checked out, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. Younger women live in a world where taking care of oneself is normalized and often expected. Fitness, grooming, and health are not seen as luxuries, they're part of daily life. For a man to show up disheveled, overweight, poorly groomed, or looking like he doesn't care about his own body suggests a mismatch in energy, values, and effort. It's not about trying to look like a 25-year-old with washboard abs. It's about showing that you still value vitality, energy, and the discipline that comes with self-care. When those things are missing, it tells her something much deeper. It says you've stopped trying, and worse, that you expect her to overlook it because of your age, wisdom, or status. There's a huge difference between aging naturally and aging carelessly. Wrinkles, gray hair, and changes in your body are normal, and when owned with confidence can even be very attractive. But letting yourself go entirely, eating poorly, never exercising, refusing to update your grooming habits, or showing up smelling like you haven't showered in days, isn't just unattractive. It feels disrespectful. It signals a lack of pride, not only in how you look, but in how you show up for others. It creates the impression that you're stuck in the past, clinging to the idea that your words or achievements alone should carry the connection. This issue becomes especially problematic when an older man criticizes the standards of younger women while not holding himself to any. If you expect youth, energy, and beauty in a partner, but you're unwilling to maintain even basic physical standards for yourself, it creates a dynamic of hypocrisy. That kind of imbalance is glaringly obvious to women. It doesn't just turn them off, it erodes respect, because if you aren't willing to invest in yourself, why should she be? Neglecting hygiene also has a more direct impact. It creates discomfort. Bad breath, unclean clothes, overgrown nails, or body odor are things people notice immediately. These aren't minor details. They're the kinds of things that silently scream, "I don't care." And that's not a message you want to be sending when trying to build attraction. Cleanliness, fresh breath, a well-fitting outfit, and a simple grooming routine are not signs of vanity. They're signals of emotional intelligence, awareness, and care. They tell a woman that you respect her presence enough to present the best version of yourself. Physical fitness, too, isn't about chasing aesthetics. It's about energy, mobility, confidence, and discipline. When a man is fit, or at least active, it radiates through his posture, his movements, and even his conversation. He comes across as more alive, more engaged, and more in control of himself. On the flip side, when he moves sluggishly, complains about his health, or can't keep up with basic physical activities, it sends a message that he's given up, that he's letting time and age take over instead of fighting back with resilience. And that energy gap becomes difficult to ignore in a relationship. Younger women are drawn to men who exude vitality, not youth, but vitality. That means being strong in presence, capable in body, and committed to staying sharp. It's about being a man who still plays an active role in life rather than sitting on the sidelines. And that kind of energy doesn't just happen. It comes from taking care of your physical self. It's built in the gym, in your morning hygiene routine, in the food you eat, in the sleep you protect, and in the commitment to showing up with excellence, not for others, but for yourself. Many men fall into the trap of thinking they no longer have to try, that once they hit a certain age, people should accept them as they are. But acceptance is earned through effort. If you want to be respected, desired, and admired, you have to lead by example. A man who takes care of himself, even in small, consistent ways, sets the tone for how he expects to be treated. He doesn't demand attention. He attracts it naturally. He doesn't force connection. He builds it through presence and effort. Neglecting physical fitness and hygiene is not a sign of comfort or confidence. It's a sign of complacency. And in relationships, complacency is a slow death. It tells your partner and the world that you're no longer interested in growth. But when a man continues to push himself to refine, to improve, to show up clean, sharp, and energized, it sends a much stronger message. I'm still in the game. I still care. I still have something powerful to offer. That's the kind of energy that never gets old. That's the kind of presence that earns attention, respect, and desire, regardless of how many candles are on the birthday cake. So if you're an older man who genuinely wants to connect with younger women, not just impress them, but connect, it starts with dropping these unattractive habits. Stop trying to act younger and start owning your maturity. Speak with respect, not superiority. Let go of bitterness. Ditch the savior complex. Take pride in your appearance and lead with presence, not ego. Because the truth is, it's not your age that turns her off. It's your attitude. The moment you shift from needing to prove something to simply being someone of value, everything changes. Confidence isn't about flexing. It's about being at peace with who you are. And that kind of energy, that's timeless.